Hello and welcome to Tucking It Up. My name is Tuck, and as you can tell from my face, I like to play around with makeup. So today's look, I actually wore to DragCon this year. I put up a few pictures here so you can see, see it in action. And it's inspired by a look that I saw Isamaya Ffrench do. She's, I think, one of the most exciting makeup artists that I've seen, that I've come across recently. Anyway, she's got a new line coming out pretty soon that I'm really, really excited about. And as soon as I saw it, I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge because I'm not the best at doing fine lines, but I really wanted to try it out because it was just such a beautiful effect. Anyway, if you'd like to see how I created this, please stay tuned. I want to keep the skin pretty clean, pretty simple, so it's going to have a little bit of sculpting, but not too much, and I'm going to use quite a light layer of foundation as well. The focus really is going to be all about the eyes and the flower buds / flower, if you will, flowers, right, depending on how you interpret it, that are coming out of the eye. And I'll keep the lip relatively simple as well. Let's go ahead and get started then. I've already done my skincare, so that's toner, moisturizer, sunscreen, as well as some lip balm. So to start, we're going to work on the eyes, and we're going to start by putting on eyeshadow primer. In this case, I'm using the Photo Focus eyeshadow primer from Wet n Wild. And I have to say, this, of everything I've tried, whether it's high-end, low-end, everything in between, this is my favorite eyeshadow primer. I've had, my eyes eat makeup for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, basically, and with this primer on, I've had looks last up to 8 to 10 hours, no fading, or very, very little fading that I can see, as just great, in my opinion. For the base color on the eyes, I'm going to use a mixture of two Color Fix mattes from Danessa Myricks. The first is Secret Garden, which is kind of a sort of, khaki kind of shade. And then I'm going to mix in a little bit of Trooper as well, which is more of a taupe. I just want a little bit of a muddier green, kind of maybe a little bit more like earth tone-like in some ways. I'm going to mix the two colors in a ratio of about 70 to 30, where 70 is the green shade. I'm concentrating them at first along the lash line, and then I am using a synthetic buffing blending brush just to pat it out / blend out the edges. Since this stuff sets pretty quickly, you do want to do one eye at a time. At this point, it's not super, super important to get everything completely precise because we're going to go over this with eyeshadow, but I do like cleaning up kind of the bigger messes, if you will, with a Q-tip, maybe some micellar water. Just make sure you have the shape kind of more or less down and that things are not looking overly patchy at this point because it will show through later on. So we're going to start with the eyeshadow, and we're going to use primarily darker green shades, deeper green shades. So for the green that I'm going to be using, I'm not going to say which palette and which company it's from because they've got some questionable, shall we say, social media practices. Anyway, if you're into makeup, you'll know which one I'm talking about immediately. Use any equivalent or comparable green shadows that you have. Using a flat shader brush, I'm going to take that darkest green shade and concentrating it mainly along the lash line and the outer corner, but essentially just lightly, and in other areas, lightly covering where the color fix was blend, where the color fix is. I'm going to take that medium green metallic shade, if you kind of imagine the eye looking like this. So you do it along that, sort of that diagonal, right? And then you use that also to blend out the edges somewhat, and then you blend it into the darker green. And finally, I'm going to take this lilac shade from Mothership 1, and I'm going to apply that, again, similarly just to the outer third in this case, using that to blend along the edges. To make sure everything is just a little bit more diffused, I'm going to take that taupey shade from Mothership 1 and just blend out the edges of this makeup. Using a black pencil, in this case the black core crayon from Hallberg, I'm going to tightline both my upper and lower waterline. I'm going to take the really thin edge of this shader brush, dip it in the black, and then use that to kind of create a shadowy, smoky kind of wing liner sort of situation. And as you can see, it's quite subtle. It's more to help with the blending of the stems later on, since we're going to be using black paint. To start off the base today, I'm going to actually use two different primers. The first is going to be a green colored primer, and that's going to be mainly around the eyebrows, and that's because when I bleached it the other day, I think I went a little heavy, and while the hair is really nice and blonde, it's also a little irritated, right, that skin around there, which is why it's kind of red/pink. And then for the rest of my face, but basically just the T-zone, I'm going to use the e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer, and it's a clear or colorless primer. For foundation today, I'm going to go in with the Water Blend foundation from Makeup Forever. It's discontinued, so basically you just want any foundation that's pretty lightweight. I'm in the shade Y315. If you saw my previous video about my undertones, you'll know that I'm not 100% just like warm, right? There's some green in my skin. I'm going to dispense about 1.5 pumps of foundation onto a palette, mix that with about 30% of that volume of the green primer, the green color corrector, just mix that with my fingers, dot it all over my face, concentrating in areas where I want a little bit more coverage, and then buffing it all out with a foundation brush. Now that the foundation is on, I'm going to add a little bit of color and structure back to the face. I'm going to go quite light today. I don't want things to look overly sculpted. So I'm actually going to skip contour. I'm going to mainly use bronzer. Using a damp beauty sponge, I'm going to dip into the light medium bronzer shade from Salt New York, and I'm going to apply that along the perimeter of my face, mainly my temples, under/on my cheekbones, and then along my jawline. Again, this is just to give a little bit of definition. And then for blush, just use the pencil, put that high up on my cheekbones, and then use a little bit of the rose shade also from Salt New York, place that closer to the center of my face, and then just blended everything together with the sponge. For the nose, actually, I want to go in and I actually do want to contour it a little bit now that I'm looking at this, because I think it just needs to stand out a little bit more. And so for that, I'm going to use the taupe shade from Salt New York. Now I'm going to finish off the cream part of the base with concealer. I'm going to use the shade, what is this? This is Vanilla from Maybelline to highlight. It's a tad too light for me, and so, even as a highlight, and so to tone it down a little bit, I'm going to mix it with a different vanilla shade, but this one is from NYX, and it's their Bear With Me concealer. I'm going to dot that lighter vanilla shade from Maybelline on the high points of my face. I'm also going to take then a little bit of the NYX vanilla, which is closer to my skin tone, and use that, just dot it in the same places. Blend everything out with in this case I'm using the tip of my beauty sponge. Make sure it's a clean area so you're not mixing the colors too much. And then I'm going to just do a tiny bit of spot concealing with the NYX vanilla shade, the one that's closer to my skin tone, just to make everything look a little bit more flawless, but I'm not necessarily going for like super perfect looking skin. Let's go ahead and set all this cream then. I'm going to use the e.l.f. setting powder in the shade Translucent, just a pretty light layer, mainly concentrating on my T-zone, and just places where I might get a little bit oily. Once I've set the center of my face, I'm just going to blend with a bigger powder brush. Actually, this one is a blush brush from Refer, but use it however you like. I'm actually putting some powder also on my neck again, just to make sure nothing transfers. Okay, so let's go do a tiny bit of highlighting. I think I want to brush up my brows a little bit too later, but anyway, let's do the highlighting first. So I'm just going to, this is going to be quite light, actually, this layer of highlighting, because I want the skin to look relatively just clean and not like too done. Alright, we're now ready to move on to the main event, which is putting on those flowers or flower buds. I'm going to start by mapping out where the flower buds will go with a brown pencil, but generally the plan is I'm going for a look that's slightly asymmetrical, so they're in the same areas, but they're not looking exactly the same. Part of this is to cheat, because it's really tricky for me to do something like that that's exactly the same on both sides on my own face. So as in the picture that I'm going to pop up here, this is the look that I wore to DragCon, right? I'm going to do 3 on each side. So one is going to be right above where my eyebrows are. One is going to be just kind of over my cheekbone, if you will. And then one will be towards my temples. Using a brown pencil, I'm just going to lightly indicate where I want the flowers to be. And you don't have to be very precise or anything about this. It's going to get covered up in pretty opaque paint. Okay, so to paint on the flowers, I'm going to use water-activated face paint. There's a bunch of different brands you can get. I found this one from Wolfe, Wolfe. They're quite nice. They're not super, super expensive. This set of 6 cost me, I think, $20. And in terms of brushes, so the technique I'm going to use is I'm not going to like paint out, if you will, the shape of the flower bud with the brush. Instead, I'm going to use the shape of the brush itself to make the flower bud. And then in terms of brushes that I'm going to use, I'm going to use ones that I have for watercolor. And I just found, I didn't have the right ones in my set. They were all a little bit too small or not the right shape. And so I'm using this number 14 brush from Royal and Langnickel. It's, again, not anything like super special, but it's a nice kind of candle shape, and it's large enough. Wet the brush that you're going to use, and then make sure to wipe off most of the water because you don't want the paint on your face running. Then load up the brush in with the paint that you're going to use, and in this case, don't just kind of go back and forth. Instead, what you want to do is roll the brush in the paint. And so this keeps the brush tip, and then also make sure that, whichever side of the brush you use, you get a pretty good amount of payoff. I'm going to use red for the majority of the flower bud itself. And then for sort of the, stem part, I'm going to dip the very tip of the brush in black, lay the brush on its side on your face where you had mapped out the flower buds earlier. So what you want to do here is you just put down the tip first with the black, and then you gently press down so that you get some of the red. And then if you want to drag it a little bit, you can, just to get the black into the red, or you can just lift off without doing that. So as you can see, I did mess up one of the buds a little bit, but because this is a water-based paint, it's quite easy to clean up. You just take a Q-tip with just water on it, and you can basically erase, and then I go over that flower bud again. Some of them look better than others, for sure. So what I need to do now is go in and refine where the buds are. I'm going to do this with a combination of eyeshadow and also the face paint that I used earlier. So the first step is I'm going to take that face paint and just make the buds a little bit more opaque. As you can see, the red didn't go on like super, super strongly for some of them, and just refine the shape to what I need, especially like right here where you can still see some of the pencil. So this is what it looks like after I've gone back in with more paint. As you can see, the red is definitely much more opaque now, and I also added some black and just made the shapes again a little bit more towards what I wanted it. So the next step is I'm going to, connect the buds to the outer corner. The idea is they're growing out of there, and and then getting to where they are right now. So I like to, especially for the really longer lines, I like to map it out again with a brown pencil. For the really short ones like this one, there's really no need to. And then what I'm going to do, and maybe I'll do this off camera because it's a little bit tricky to do it with the current setup that I have, is go over the outline or the brown map with the black paint. Okay, so the flower buds are more or less done. We're going to go in after this and touch it up with some shadow and add a little bit of detail. I'm going to take the red from this palette. I like it because it's got a little bit of a purplish tinge to it. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but I'm going to just shade that over where the flower buds are. And then to blend the stems into the eyes a little bit better, I'm just going to take some black and just really, define the outer corners and bring the lines into the shadow a little bit more. I want to add a little bit more detail to the flower buds themselves. And so to do that, I'm going to use a fine brush, dip it into the white, and just add basically some, I guess you could say, the things that are supposed to be stamens. Using the same fine tip brush that I used to draw the stems, I'm going to just draw a little bit of white in there. It went on a little bit stronger than I wanted to at first, but that's okay. I'm going to then just wash off the brush and use some water to soften out the white. And at long last, we're going to finish off the eyes. So I'm going to finish off the under eye, add a little bit more color there. After push lining and tight lining, I'm going to finish off the under eye by taking that darkest green shade from earlier onto a pencil brush, concentrate that on the outer corner, bring that in about halfway, and then just make sure you fade as you go closer towards the inner corner. And then I'm going to take lilac on that lilac shade that I used earlier on this same pencil brush, apply that starting in the inner corner and then meeting the darker green. And finally, as an inner corner highlight, I'm going to take Astral White again on that pencil brush, place it in the sort of inner, maybe the first like fifth of the eye at the, the top lid, and then also just along the bottom inner corner. Right, now that the eye is done, let's finish everything off with the lips. I'm going to keep the lips a little bit, not super defined, kind of a little bit of an ombre, but like a blurred line as well, blurred lip line as well. So to apply the base of the color that I want, I'm going to use the Black Up pencil in the shade, Jumbo pencil in the shade number 16. It's kind of this dark red that has some purple to it, and so that's really nice to go along with the flowers. But it's a little dark on its own, and so on top of that, I'm going to apply the Maybelline Superstay in, what shade is this? In Exhilarator, which is quite a bright red, but I'm going to tap it out. I'm going to start by placing the Jumbo lip pencil down in the center of the lip, and I'm going to concentrate most of the color here and start, I will fill in the rest of it, but I'll mainly be blending out from the center. And then once I have a pretty good base on, I'm going to take that Maybelline liquid lipstick, and again, this one really concentrated in the middle of the lip so that I get the brighter red right there, and blend out with my fingers. And then finally, to tie the whole face together and give the lips just a little bit more dimension, I'm going to tap on some Astral White, the shadow, the topper that I used in my inner corner, and just put that over the very center of the bottom lip particularly. This is the final look then. Let's do a quick tour as always. And here we are at the end of another video. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm overall pleased with how this turned out. If you like content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe and bye!